Okay, and now we're just gonna have that delay I warned you about, which Facebook always has, as we connect to our mighty mystery fans and friends. Almost there. And it looks like we are live. Welcome, mighty mystery friends and fans. I'm your on-air host, Sarah DeVello, and I am thrilled today to be hosting Emily Gray Tedrowe. Am I saying that right, Tedrowe?
It's actually Tedrowe, but yeah, Tedrowe.
Yeah, no, I want to get it right. It's so important. These are names. Emily Gray Tedrowe, author of The Talented Miss Farwell. Emily, welcome to Mighty Mysteries. Tell us about your book.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you guys at A Mighty Mystery. Thank you, A Mighty Blaze. This is so cool. This initiative has been amazing to watch from the sidelines. As an author, as a reader during this time, it just feels like what an incredible surge of goodwill and activism you guys put out there. It's incredible. So when I got the invite, I was just like jumping up and down. I was so excited.
Yes, we're so thrilled to have you. We're so thrilled to have you.
It's so great. And so yeah, I'm going to talk about The Talented Miss Farwell, which came out today. So today is the pub date, which is extra exciting to be able to be here today. This is my third novel, and it is a story about a con artist, a female con artist who embezzles, it's not a giveaway here, it embezzles $50 million over 20 years from a tiny town where she works as the town government official. And it is based loosely inspired by a true story. And yeah, that's, I guess, what I can say now, although I'm happy to talk more about it.
Well, we want to talk so much about all of that, including the true story that is based on, let's start there. How did you hear about this true story? How did it reel you in? How did it make you want to write this book? Give us the inside scoop.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I was driving Lakeshore Drive. I live in Chicago, so I was driving up Lakeshore Drive. This is about 2013-ish, and I heard an NPR story for breaking news that a woman had been arrested in a tiny, small Illinois town for embezzling $50 million over 20 years as a government employee. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that the newscaster said that the FBI had held off held off arresting the person because, as they said, the FBI didn't believe that a woman alone could pull off a crime of that magnitude for that long. So essentially, they were looking for a male co-conspirator. And, you know, as a fiction writer, that's just gold. I was instantly captivated. But I have to say, what I did next is probably also pretty typical of novelists. I stopped reading much about the actual true story, you know? So I got a glimpse into this idea. I was hooked. I wanted to know, what is it like to stay in your small town while you are stealing from your neighbors, from your friends, from your church, from your school, over that long period of time, to lie to them, you know, face to face. And what do you have to do inwardly? Like, that was my interest. What kind of justification or rationalization do you do to sustain that? So that was my hook. I was totally inspired.
Wow. Well, I know I am hooked because everything about that is so crazy and so juicy. Oh my God. Wow. I want to get into all of that, but first I just want to welcome all of our friends who are watching on Facebook. Welcome, Christy. Welcome, Gail. Gail says it must be Chicago Day with Sarah. Gail, you're right. Welcome back. Top community member here, Gail. We just had Dr. Ian K. Smith on, also a book based in Chicago. It is Chicago Day. Crazy.
Chicago Day.
Tell us where you're watching from, everybody. Tell us where you're tuning in from today, and tell us what questions you have for Emily about her book, about her process, about real life cons, about her research, whatever it is that you are wondering. You know how it works. Type it in the comment box and I will get it right over to her. I know it always takes me a minute to think of questions. So while you're thinking of them, I have got to share just a few words of your absolutely incredible praise. So Rebecca Mackay, author of The Great Believers, raving Becky Farwell is one of the most wickedly compelling characters I've read in ages. A Machiavellian marvel, a modern Becky Sharp, a character to root for despite your better judgment. And her story, both topical and timeless, will knock you off your feet. Wow, rave review. And again, incredible to receive that kind of praise from Rebecca Mackay. You have Real Simple Magazine raving a read it to believe it page turner about a con artist whose luck can't last. Publishers Weekly awarding it a starred review. Wow. Saying perfectly executed. You never hear that. Perfectly executed. Tedrowe does a spectacular job of demonstrating the mindset of a character who justifies her criminal activity while believing she's ultimately good. Booklist saying both lighthearted and deeply conflicted. Tedrowe's caper with its Becky Sharp allusions raises significant moral issues. Crime Read saying sharp, darkly comedic, and full of fascinating facts about the art world. Medium saying riveting. With Becky Farwell, Tedrowe has created one of the year's most fascinating, complex, nuanced characters. Oh my God, I could go on and on because the reviews just keep coming. But let's get into this. So Emily, how do you write a character who is, as they said, nuanced? How do you write someone who is evil, who's a thief, who robs her neighbors and smiles in their faces, and yet still get us to root for her? How do you do that?
Well, I think that for me, the key was that Becky, my character, never sees herself as a villain. I mean, isn't there's that old saw, like, nobody's the villain in their own movie of their life, right? We're all the hero. We're all the sort of protagonist of our own life. And that's how my character feels. And I think one of the things she does is she steals these incredible amounts of money. And what she does is she funnels them into her art collecting business. She's a passionate lover of contemporary art, and she builds a collection that is world renowned. But she does this by embezzling money, and then she will sometimes pay it back from the proceeds of selling her art or reselling her art. So another thing that she is able to do is to tell herself, look at all the good I'm doing. So for example, in her impoverished town, she funds the Little League team. She it pays for the prom at the high school. She redoes the surfaces of the basketball court. She provides tutoring that's not available for the kids. And these are, expensive programs that the town wouldn't have if she hadn't funded them. However, the original sort of seed of that money that grew to the investment that she was able to make came from a crime. So in a way, she has to pay back enough to keep that sort of belief going inside her, like, okay, I am doing the right thing. I'm taking care of my town. She does love her town. She's been a long time member. But she, it's one of those rationalizations that maybe only a sort of con artist could make.
Wow, that is very interesting. I think you're right. Most of us do see ourselves as the heroine or hero of our own lives, but most of us are not embezzling $50 million.
Yes.
So
That is true. But like everything, it started with a small amount. She didn't launch into millions. It starts with a $500 mistake, which she uses to buy one piece of art that has struck her. So, and that torments her for quite some time. And it's kind of a funny way that she sort of, feels like she has to pay that back. And once she does, you'd think she's off the hook, but because of Becky's sort of obsession with art, that's not enough. And another thing about her is that she is just one of those people for whom, any amount is not enough. She's never content. She always wants more. And that torments her to some degree.
Wow, this is so interesting and giving us a glimpse into how you were able to write a character like this with such heart that allows us to feel for her and to root for her, as the reviews have said. I want to get more into that, but first I want to just welcome everybody again. Questions are already starting to pour in. Amy saying, hello, Emily. You posted this morning that many novels are hard to write, but this one was lots of fun. Why was it so much fun? What made the difference? Good question, Amy. Let's get into it.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so glad you asked that. I mean, You know, first of all, yes, like my first two novels involved a lot of sort of work and learning and putting your shoulder to the grindstone, or is it your nose to the grindstone? I don't know, putting something to the grindstone. And this book was sort of like maybe one of those magical gifts from whatever gods, you know, the novelists pray to. It just came to me all at once. The character existed instantly. I knew Becky inside out right from the start when I envisioned her. And I think that the joy of writing it came from really fully going there with a character who is just um, all in what she wants. She will stop at nothing. She has these crazy adventures. She nearly gets caught about 5 or 6 times. So being able to kind of write a character who has no abandon gave my own writing this sense of no abandon. And I was able to really sort of let go and, you know, kind of embrace this plot, which for me was a lot more eventful than the plots I've worked with before. There were, you know, there are a lot of sort of heisty elements in this novel that I hadn't worked on. There's big sums of money. There's danger, and so for me, I think the joy came from doing something I hadn't done before and allowing Becky's exuberance to kind of infect my own process while I was working on it.
Oh, I love that answer and that question. Thank you, Amy. Gail saying, interesting premise. I've heard that most embezzlers steal for drug or gambling habits. Emily, tell us about your research process. Is that true? And how did you research this?
So, well, you know, that's interesting, Gail. I don't know exactly what most embezzlers use the funds for, but I will say that when it came to writing my character, the original story, the true story that this is very loosely inspired by, the woman who pulled off that crime put it all into her horse breeding business, her horse breeding and showing business, which of course is an extremely high profile, high stakes, high finance game. So I knew right away that I was not going to write a horse novel. I don't know that world. I'm a city girl. But I have been fascinated by the art world for a long time. And not in any kind of participatory way, but I'm interested. I read the articles. I like to go to art shows. I'm curious about what pieces people buy and why you might spend a lot of money for a piece of art. So I knew right away that I wanted to use that setting, that way, as to show what Becky is obsessed with funding. Like, for example, I don't think she steals the money and then looks to see what she might spend it on. She absolutely needs this art in her life. She'll stop at nothing. And so for her, this is definitely a means to an end. So when she embezzles and when she buys these pieces of art, I think it feeds something in her soul, like an emptiness or a need that she has. So maybe in that way, it is a little bit like an addiction. But yeah, that's sort of what her driving force is, this absolute need to acquire more and more of this one specific thing, the most high-end internationally, you know, sort of known contemporary art.
Wow. These are worlds I do not know anything about. So I'm so interested. I'm just listening because they're so interesting. Gail saying horse breeding might be considered a form of gambling, as it sounds like an art is, willing, you know, demanding you to do anything to get that next fix, that next acquisition, that next endorphin high of the thrill of the acquisition. I mean, I don't know. I'm just imagining. Andrea Chapman saying, this sounds great. Andrea, I totally agree. So Emily, did you ever think about doing about her addiction, let's say, being anything other than art? Did you ever consider anything, or you knew it had to be art?
I knew it right away. I knew it was going to be art. And I think one of the reasons that worked so well for me is because, okay, so as I wrote this character, I had this ongoing tension, which is how much can we love or identify with or empathize with a main character who steals that much money, right? Who causes that much damage, damage to her friends, to her relationships, to her town, you know, intentionally causes that damage. Like, how am I going to ask a reader to stay with that character for the length of an entire novel? And I guess the thing that I wondered about was could there be a mitigating factor in what she spends it on? Is it worth something? Does it excuse anything if she just loves art and needs to have it to look at? Is that anything better than, like, say she was into, sneakers and, bought like all those fancy sneakers? Or what if she was really into fancy trips and went skiing and all the, sort of like top places? I mean, I'm not saying that, it needs to be excused, and certainly she doesn't get excused. But for me, the love of art is such a almost passionate, devotional way of living. And also something that I think she doesn't have a choice about. She feels like this obsession just entered her like a thunderbolt. And so I think I wanted to stay in that world to see, like, okay, if you love something that much, is there any way that we can understand what she, the lengths she'll go to own this stuff? And in a way, I feel sorry for her as I was writing this. In her passionate drive and her ambition and her obsession, she didn't ask for any of that. And she does it all secretly. It's not like it's helping her get anywhere, right?
Oh, it's so interesting. Now, Emily, how long did it take you to write this book, start to finish, soup to nuts?
Okay, so it's funny you should ask that. So I thought that might come up. So I went back and got my original. So for every novel, I get like a giant notebook. Ooh. And I just spend maybe a year or two just writing about the story. It's like a journal, but for my novel. And if I turn to the first page, all right, you can see October 24th, 1913. And what this says is, a novel about a woman in a small Illinois town, works in the government office, over the course of 20 years, embezzles $50 million from taxpayers in order to fund art collection. So that was the first sentence of this book that I used to just, kind of take notes on. So that's 7 years ago. I want to say I wrote in this book just kind of taking notes for about a year, planning my idea, learning about my character, thinking about the plot. And then writing a draft probably took me about 2 years, just kind of in and around raising my kids, having my day job, promoting my other books. And then when I sold the book, my editor, who's incredibly amazing, Kate Ninsel from Custom House, she had some pretty substantial ideas about how to continue developing the story. And I'm so grateful. They were incredible edits, but I want to say that kicked us out another half a year or a year. And then, the publishing process is not a quick one, as you guys may know. It's a pretty slow industry. So I think that takes us up to today. So 7 years from that first sentence in the notebook to holding the book in my hand today.
Well, Emily, you are getting a ton of love for your giant notebook.
Oh.
So many comments and hearts over here on Facebook. My partner in crime, pun intended, Margaret.
See what you did there.
I'll be here all day. My partner in crime, Margaret Pernard, also an incredible author, is running things over on Facebook, producing the event. She's saying giant notebook love.
Yeah, giant notebook. I know you're my people, the giant notebook people.
The giant notebook people are saying cool notebook. Everybody loves it. I love it. Yeah. So wow. Okay. So first of all, I just love that it's giant. That's cool. Yep. Second of all, I love that you wrote in it. I saw some cutouts, some sort of vision boarding kind of stuff, right. Stuff that you had seen in magazines or whatever, perhaps, that resonated with you. Mm-hmm. And then you spent a year just dedicating yourself to the story, to these characters, to building this world. Yes. What a beautiful process. What a beautiful way to honor the muse and to really immerse yourself in it. I've never seen anyone do that before here on A Mighty Blaze or ever. And I think that is so freaking cool.
I love it. I mean, honestly, that's my favorite part of writing novels, is that sort of dreaming it before you start writing. And I do love the first draft writing, but there are, years of my life where I've carried that giant notebook around in my backpack. And it's almost like a journal I have, but for another life, something that exists only in my mind, and, that I don't really talk about to people. And in that time, I'm not outlining, I'm not really, doing anything very productive. I'm just kind of dreaming. I'm just sort of brainstorming.
Mm.
I'm asking myself questions. I'm freestyling answers. When I do see, something that reminds me of it, I'll scrapbook it. I'll tear it out and put it in there. Sometimes I did, okay, so this is really weird, but during the writing of this book, I got really into the tarot. I'm really outing myself here as a new ager, but I did a couple, so like every day when I would sit down to work on it, I'd pull a card and then I'd see what that card might suggest for me about my character or about the writing process. And I would use that as a prompt to kind of get into the story. And, it really was very helpful. It was very suggestive and creative, and it got me to think outside the box a little bit. So it's funny because when I was flipping through this earlier today, I kept seeing, oh, I pulled the so-and-so card and that's making me think of X element. And I'm wondering if Becky had that kind of conflict with her dad before all this started. It really kind of deepened my work on the book.
Ah, I love that. And actually, our Mighty Blaze co-founder, New York Times bestselling author Caroline Levitt,
Sure.
whose book just came out this summer, whose 11th book just came out this summer, she is into tarot. And I did not know that until I interviewed her for an event.
Oh,
So I
that's
had
so
no
cool.
idea. Yeah. And I don't even know if she pulls them for her writing process. That is fascinating. I love that you use that as a tool for your process.
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it's weird because like it hasn't come up. I've known about the tarot and been interested in it for a while. I haven't used it for either of my previous novels, and I'm not really using it for the one I'm working on now. But for some reason, for this book, it seemed really important. I don't know why.
wow. Especially because it's not a mystical book. You're writing about a thief.
No kidding. I know there's no real new agey, and it's very Midwestern. Becky is like a small town government employee. She's, she loves her church. She leads on the surface this very upstanding small town, she goes to these, shoe drives and bake sales, and she has a best friend, and they, rent movies together. And, it's sort of a lovely, quiet life that's very grounded in Midwestern on the surface. And so, yeah, it is funny that the tarot was kind of helping me out with that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Gail saying Emily truly has a unique process. This is such a fun talk. Thank you so much. Gail's a top community member here at A Mighty Blaze and our Mighty Mystery. So thank you, Gail. I appreciate that. Emily, right before we went live, you said something that stuck with me, and you said this is your third novel.
Yeah.
You never pictured yourself as a thriller writer. You never saw yourself as a mystery writer, but here you are. Tell us about that. Why didn't you see yourself that way, and how did you end up writing a thriller?
Yes, so it's been really kind of gratifying to be embraced by the mystery and thriller community. I'm really, I'm so happy. I mean, I read all kinds of books, and I do love mysteries, and I love thrillers. Um, when I set out to write this novel, I think my interest was so character focused. It was so based on like, what is the psychology like of somebody who could do this, who could sustain a double life?
Mm.
And my other interest is, a lot of times when we see women in fiction and they have a double life, that's usually in the relationships realm, right?
Yes.
Like maybe
Yes.
cheating on a partner, or, oh, a woman who leaves her kids, or this kind of, sort of about the relationship world. And so my character was going to be a con artist who is pretty much like, balls to the wall about success and money and what she wants and her ambition and getting hers. So I think that because I was so focused on Becky's character, I maybe forgot that I was also writing the plot that involves, sort of a heist, a long-term con, many sort of close calls.
Mm.
The feds closing in, a lot of sort of dangerous moments. And because my interest was like inside Becky's mind and heart, and I was writing the other stuff and enjoying it, but I think it wasn't until it was out, or coming out and people were talking about it, that I thought, okay, it does kind of fit into this realm. There are elements that make it chime with some thrillers and some sort of like psychological thrillers that I've really loved.
Ah, that's so interesting. So you didn't even know you were writing this heist book. You're writing it from the emotional perspective. That's so
Yeah.
interesting. And I think we're all fascinated by real life cons.
Yes.
Let me ask Facebook friends, what real life cons have you witnessed? Have you read about in the news? Immediately, I'm thinking of Bernie Madoff,
Right.
and most recently, Caroline Calloway.
Mhm.
Audience, tell us, have you been aware of these or other cons? What's the fascination? What do you like? What cons do you know about? So obviously everyone knows about Bernie Madoff embezzling millions from investors.
Right.
Caroline Calloway, sort of only in the age of social media. So she was an influencer. She built herself up into having hundreds of thousands, I think 800,000 followers or something, or maybe it was 900,000 followers. Got a huge book deal out of it, was sort of living La Vida Loca, very glamorous life, only to find out that she was not, that a lot of her followers were fake and bought, just bot accounts, and B, that her best friend at the time, and they had since parted ways, had been writing all of the content for which she had become known and beloved, and in fact had ghostwritten part of the book for which she had gotten the book deal but no credit. So what other, let me just put out some, what other cons do you guys know about? What have you heard about? What have you been watching? And what about you, Emily? Was this the one that you heard about on NPR of the woman who embezzled the $50 million?
Yeah.
But the feds didn't think it could possibly be her, because what woman would be capable of that?
Yeah, right.
I love that. You're like, this woman is capable of
Uh-huh.
this.
Yeah.
Had you been following any other real life cons as well?
Well, it's funny because so obviously my title is an homage to The Talented Mr. Ripley by Patricia Highsmith. I came to this title really late in the game. The novel was finished. It had sold. We were getting ready to start putting together the whole package, and I didn't have a title. And so it came to me that I really wanted to emphasize her femaleness in the title, and so have it be a twist on the talented Mr. Ripley. And it's also the sort of way that her town views her. She is talented. They've always loved her. They've depended on her to save them time and time again. But of course, she has this secret talent too, which is conning people. So yeah, I'm a Highsmith fan. I love the aspect of the Ripley novels where one of the things that's sort of so beautiful about Tom Ripley is that, he kind of like, he'll commit these murders, but then he will sort of just like enjoy the gentleman's life in France. Like, he gardens and he's a good host and he's always offering you a cup of tea when you need it, and, going to see music and learning how to play the harpsichord. So he, the sort of, or his origin story is, from a very sort of working class background. And then he kind of vaults himself up to this sort of life of leisure. And I think we just, as fans, really enjoy his, sort of his ability to do that and the way he enjoys the fruits of his crime. So, I mean, that was a big, kind of like model for me when I was thinking about this book.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, and I did notice the play on the, the homage to the title, and I loved the femaleness of it, and sort of that fresh female take. And I also really love that it didn't. I noticed. Also have noticed that a lot of female duplicity, and also just all sorts of female stories, tend to focus on the relationship realm.
Right.
And I, for one, am really excited to see books sort of grow outside of those confines, because women are not defined by the entirety of their relationships. This is
Absolutely.
maybe only one spoke on our wheel of life, or maybe not a spoke at all. There's a lot
Yeah.
of other things out there to enjoy and to explore. So I love that you didn't confine it to that, and in fact made her this, just outright thief. Although I'm sure she probably wouldn't say that about herself.
Yeah, no, she wouldn't use that term, but yes, definitely. I agree. I mean, I think my last novel I had written that was my two characters, both women, they were both deeply relational. And I went very, deeply into their lives as mothers and as partners. One's a wife and one has a boyfriend, and just kind of, and being daughters. And I really like loved developing those rich, complex relationships. And it's definitely one of the reasons I go to fiction, is to read those kinds of relationships.
Hmm.
But it was sort of maybe refreshing, and part of that joy I mentioned before, to write about a woman whose greatest love and sort of her longtime love has nothing to do with another person. You know,
Mm.
she does have sex sometimes, she has friendships, but those aren't the core of her life, the core of her being. And that felt unusual to me. And it's not my life, but I instantly got it. I thought, yes, there are people for whom their deepest and strongest and most important relationship does not have to do with another person. You know, could be an activity, could be an object, could be a passion. So that was really kind of something I wanted to explore.
Let's get back to the giant notebook, because I know I'm still thinking about that.
Okay.
Do you ever get a giant notebook,
Yeah.
start down the path, get however far down it, and then say, this isn't working? Do you have unfinished notebooks or discarded notebooks, or it just didn't work out to be a book?
Do I have unfinished notebooks? Just wait, Sarah.
I know. See, this is what I live for my Blaze. I want to see inside the writer's lair. I want to see what she's got in there.
All right, so I would say that of these notebooks, they are partially used, and they weren't cheap. And I'm not thrilled about the fact that, you know, they are partially used. Maybe I'll come back to an idea that's in one of them, but these are have been put away stack. So yes, I often start, not often, but it does happen. And do I wish I had a different process where I could know if something's going to work or not before I spent, you know, a while carrying around a notebook and writing in it? I mean, sure. But, you know, this is what I know about myself. I know my process, and it does involve a lot of scribbling in a notebook. So yes, I am very prone to buying notebooks, but not necessarily filling them.
I'm so relieved right now that I'm not the only one with, and I've got far more than you, like 20 half-filled notebooks. I love notebooks, and I have so many. I have a stack of ones that I have found beautiful and bought and will use someday. And then I have ones that, you know, were just dedicated to one task, and some, you know, that are just dreaming sort of, you know, journals. And I have many that are half used and not at all used. And so I'm so glad I'm not the only one. I feel so validated right now.
Good, yeah. I mean, another thing I write about in my process is I sort of journal about the process as it's happening. Like, the words in that big notebook are not just about Becky Farwell, but they're also about me and my life as a writer. So there's stuff in there about the different seasons through which I've written. If you're a parent, you might know that a lot of your writing is built around your kid's schedule. And so there's some entries in there that are about how difficult summers are without, you know, as much childcare. How am I going to find time to write? Or there's entries in there about when, you know, I wasn't feeling good, or sometimes when I'm not feeling as connected to the material. Sometimes reminding myself of the fact that I've been here before, suggestions to myself about maybe a little more exercise, maybe reading a couple of different books, maybe, you know, sort of taking more time outside away from the internet. I mean, that's always a good suggestion for me.
Right, exactly. Especially right now, things are so stressful, and I can get really I can really work myself up into a tiz getting online.
For sure.
So
Same.
those times away are so important. And Emily, you're not only a writer, you're also a teacher. You also hold a PhD in literature from NYU, from New York University, an amazing, amazing accomplishment. So many of our community members here are writers, aspiring authors, lovers of the craft. Tell us, as someone who holds a PhD in literature, as a writer, as a teacher of writing, what do you think are some of the keys to writing a great book, a book that earns the kind of praise that you know, some of which I shared earlier in the interview? How do you do that? What are the keys?
Okay, well, there is no, first you got to buy a big notebook. Just kidding. But I will say that when I have taught writing to, I'm going to say adults, but meaning, you know, I've taught both at the college level, and I've taught some classes through a community writing center. And when I teach adults who have usually either maybe part or full-time jobs, or they have family obligations, one of the things I talk about is consistency in work,
Mm,
especially when you're writing a novel. Um, Picking up short stories can be done in short blasts, right? Like you work on it like crazy over the weekend and then you ignore it for 2 weeks. But you're able to kind of keep your mind around the story because it's confined and it's shorter. Well, it's very hard to keep your mind engaged with a book, either that you're writing or that you're reading, if you don't work on it pretty consistently. So I'm a sort of write every day kind of girl, and I'm not saying I necessarily have to power out a certain amount of words per day, but I do sort of like, I write every day on the book. And so in fact, one of the classes I taught, I think I had come up with this, sort of tip for them where I was like, okay, you guys, I want you, even if you don't sit down and have a great session, say you've got a crazy day at work, I want you to at least, touch it every day. I want you to touch it every day. So they thought that was pretty hilarious and maybe a little bit bawdy. So they made t-shirts and mugs for all of us that said, like novel in a year 2017, touch it every day or something. And so I
it's
will
going to be
say that I
our hashtag. That's going to be our hashtag. It's trending now.
hashtag touch
Hashtag
it every
touch it
day.
every day.
I find that that keeps me close to the story. And I think what it does is that on some level, I'm thinking and solving problems about character, about plot, even when I'm not at my desk, right? So if you are opening that computer file every day, if you are writing a note, writing a paragraph, sometimes even just texting yourself some stuff. Like I have a friend who's working on her book on her car ride to and from work by looking at her phone. I think that that keeps it very like as a working idea in your mind. And I've found that the opposite, for example, if you put down the book for a couple weeks, that's pretty deadly, I think. So in my mind, even like 15 minutes a day, it's like exercise. I mean, no one wants to do it before you do it, but nobody ever says afterwards, oh, I wish I hadn't exercised today, right? So that's kind of how it is with writing. That's one thing.
I
And then
love that.
the second tip that I always give is to think of yourself as reading your book while you're writing it and in difficult moments. So for example, if I'm stuck when I'm writing a scene and I don't know what's going to happen next, or the characters are talking but like nothing's happening, or you're just feeling like, ugh, what am I doing here? I always ask myself, if I were reading this book, what
Mm.
would I want to happen now? And that will access an instinct that you have as a reader that's not always present when you're writing, but is very strong and usually very sophisticated. Our reading instincts are much stronger than our writing instincts. How many books have we read compared to how many books have you written, right? So if you can tap into your instincts as a reader, following those will really help your writing. And it's a tip that's like never steered me wrong, seriously.
Oh, I love that. And I have not heard either of those things. So thank you for both of those pieces of wisdom. And it's really making me think about this in a different way. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. I can feel my brain sort of noodling on that and
Oh,
processing
good,
this in a different way. So thank you.
good.
Yeah. So do you when you are making yourself sit down every day and do the minimum exercise, the 15 minutes, do you then, find yourself getting swept up and you blink and 3 hours has gone by, or you just, hit that count or hit that goal and you're gone?
It kind of depends. I mean, so I will say that like different phases of the writing process are easier than others. And I'm sure we all have our favorite part of it. Some people love revision. Some people love, the concepting. Some people love writing first drafts. And so there are parts where like on the days when I'm hitting my stride, I will try to write for at least an hour or two a day and push the story forward. I always write chronologically in a story. I never jump from part to part.
Ooh.
Because for me, I'm running the whole story through my mind as I write it. And then as a friend once said, you know, you're going to have to write those parts anyway, so you might as well write them when they come up. Um,
She
and
sounds like a
yeah,
person
so
who
I
has
guess
more
I do.
discipline than me.
Yeah. So yeah, I try to, you know, I would try to get a good hour of work, like a good 1 to 2 hours of work in per day is kind of all you need. I mean, I'm definitely like, and this is a strong feminist stance I take, especially with my students who are women. Um, you do not need to go off to that cabin in the woods and isolate. You do not need to go to the top of a mountaintop and commune with the male gods of, you know, the great American novel or whatever. I wrote my first novel in a lot of chunks with Dora the Explorer playing in the background and my kids on the couch with me. You know, and I can look in my book and see parts that I know I was writing while I was back. I mean, my kitchen's right around the corner here. Like, this is where I make dinner every day. You know, this is where I help my kids with their homework. And writing in the middle of life is not only possible, but I think it's preferable. You know, books are not meant to be coming out of these sort of airless, isolated experiences. You know, they're part of life. So I definitely want you to know, if you are like kind of an emerging writer, that 1 to 2 hours a day, like that's the most writing I do when I'm creating. And that's plenty when you have a full-time job. It's not easy, you know, but it's doable for a mom with a full-time job and kids, you know?
Oh, this is so empowering. Gail saying, although it's a great excuse to get away to that cabin. Patricia saying, too funny when I stall, I think, what if, but so great to think of it as the reader is, as what the reader would want to see is also great. Yeah, I totally agree, Patricia and Gail. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Emily, let me ask you, what is your favorite scene from this book? If you can tell us without giving anything away.
Okay. All right. So I love a scene where Becky has arrived at a church volunteer effort with her best friend Ingrid, and they are there sorting shoes for a donation. And it's a long day of, you know, a lot of physical activity, and they're tired and they're stressed. And then Becky overhears someone saying that it's actually Columbus Day, or, you know, Indigenous Peoples Day, I guess we call it. And so Monday, things are closed, and she's totally forgotten about that. And the problem is that she had meant to get to the bank on Friday to deposit a check to cover a gaping hole in one of the town's accounts that she had stolen money from. And then she wasn't able to do it, so she was counting on Monday before a Tuesday meeting at which these accounts would be looked at. And now she realizes on a Saturday that she only has 2 hours to deposit this check. So long story short, but she has to floor it in her car and drive first to Chicago to access this money and get the check from someone who owes her, and then zoom back to this bank where she has to literally like run to the door to be able to deposit the check before they close at like 1 o'clock on Saturday. And that was one of the first scenes I envisioned when I was thinking about this book. I have a lot of pages where I was kind of writing about it, and it came out pretty fun, I would say. Like, there's a lot of tension in it. There's some funny moments. There's also the palpable fear she has of getting caught. And for me, that was one of the sort of elements I really wanted to develop. Like, you know, we can't maybe empathize so much with her crime, but we can all empathize with a terrible feeling of, I'm going to get caught doing something wrong, whatever that might mean to us. And that's a terrible feeling. And scrambling around trying to fix a terrible mistake you've made, whether that's at work or, you know, with something you've done to your, you know, best friend by accident. That sense of like, oh my God, I'm about to be exposed. I tried to really, you know, turn up the volume on. So for me, that was one of the most fun scenes to write, and a fun one for me to read.
Oh yeah, already I feel myself getting a little anxious, a little fluttery, starting to sweat. My partner in crime, Margaret Pinard, saying Saturday bank hours, drive plot action. You're not wrong.
We've all been there. Got to get to
We've
the
all been
bank
there, right?
before it closes.
Racing the clock. Come on, red
Yeah.
lights. You know, that's stress. Patricia saying, "Oh, come on, Emily. These cabin weekends with Greek gods are magical." LOL. There's a place for all worlds, at work, at home, at work, etc.
Hey,
LOL.
look, if you get a cabin weekend, I'm not saying don't take it. You take that cabin weekend. I'm
Yeah,
saying you don't
Patricia, take
need
that
that
cabin
cabin
weekend and
weekend.
take us all with you. A
Yeah,
women's writer retreat. Here we come.
absolutely.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I love that. What would you, what's one thing that you want people to walk away from this book feeling?
Hmm. Um, I think that one of the things that I wrote about in this book is kind of what we owe each other. Becky is maybe not the easiest person to be with, but she is a member of a community that she's very devoted to. And she does have a very close friend, Ingrid, and their friendship, if you read it, you'll see extends over this 20-year period. Um, and there's a lot of back and forth in which these two women really take care of each other. One
Hmm.
of whom, of course, is, kind of creating this epic crime on the side. And um, that personal betrayal is something that I think I've heard is very painful in the way I sort of bring it about. Um,
Hmm.
and does make me wonder, and I would hope my readers wonder, what is it that Becky owes Ingrid? Becky would say to her, look, I paid out of pocket for your kids, therapy. I took you on this vacation. Um, but of course there's something wrong there too, that Becky can't really see or understand fully until later. So to me, that's sort of like a deeper emotional moment. I mean, the stealing, the crime, the money, that's like maybe the fun part of the book, but at its heart, I think are some questions about, what it truly means to be in friendship or in relationship with someone.
Oh, wow. I love that. And it's so true because we all see things so differently, usually not that differently,
Yeah,
but
right.
we see a lot of things really differently.
Yeah.
So this is, yeah, wow, that's such a powerful, um, thought-provoking moment that you're providing us here
Thank
on,
you.
into those pages. I'm gonna have to really sit with that because that's a lot. That's a lot to process. It's so interesting. Gail saying, "Don't embezzle." Patricia says she's in for the Women's Writers Weekend.
Yeah,
Um, Also, that
do
she
it.
loves when you can tuck humor into the story. It seems to make it more human.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah,
Yeah, I love humor. I'm a humor connoisseur. I like when people are funny, and I like when my characters are funny. I mean, I always tell my students, like, if you can write something funny, that's like, just that's pretty gold on its own. And life is funny a lot of the times, even during hard times, like, maybe something we know about now, right? Humor can be really kind of a great way to get through it, a great way to, sort of help ourselves through it.
absolutely, absolutely. Chris Walter saying, "Thanks for the shout out." You're so welcome, Chris. Well, Emily, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us here on A Mighty Blaze, Mighty Mystery. Thank you to all of our community on Facebook. You guys are amazing. Thank you to my partner in crime, Margaret Pinard, as always, killing it on the production side, on the Facebook side, keeping everything going over there and adding to the conversation so valuably. I appreciate you. Thank you, Emily. Congratulations on the Talented Miss Farwell, out today to incredible praise. It has been such a pleasure hosting you here. It's been such a pleasure talking with you here. Everyone saying thank you so much. You're so welcome, everybody. And we would love to have you back on A Mighty Blaze. Congratulations.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody who came. Thank you, A Mighty Blaze. This has been amazing. I'm really happy to spend my pub day talking to you.
Yay! We're so happy to have you. All right, everybody, we will see you next time on A Mighty Blaze. Thank you again, and congratulations, Emily Gray Tedrowe. And also Margaret is linking to our very special partnership, I forgot to say this, to withbookshop.org. So you can pick up a copy of The Talented Miss Farwell today and support our beloved independent bookstores. Link is in the comments. Get your copy today.
Please support the indies. I love Bookshop. I love your bricks and mortar indie store. And absolutely, that's where our money should go.
Absolutely. Yay. Thank you again, Emily. We'll see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.